You lost your right to this place the moment you left. That was the first thing my cousin Eric said to me as he leaned against the doorframe of my aunt's cabin, my cabin now, its fresh silver padlock glinting in the afternoon light like something deliberately cruel. He didn't open the door. Didn't even step aside. Just let the silence stretch between us, heavy and smug. Behind him, I could hear music pulsing, laughter spilling out onto the porch I used to sweep as a child. The air smelled like beer and charcoal, not pine and lake water the way it always had with my aunt. I kept my hands in my pockets so he wouldn't see them clench. I'm not here to fight, I said quietly. I just want to go inside. Eric smirked the way people do when they think they're holding the winning hand. Inside? No. We're in the middle of something. You can come back later. Or better yet, don't. The door shut in my face with a soft, deliberate click. A click that felt louder than the music, louder than the laughter, louder than the breath I forced myself to keep steady. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of the door I wasn't allowed to touch, listening to the muffled echo of people who had never lifted a finger for my aunt suddenly treating her home as their playground. Her sanctuary. My inheritance. I should have walked away. But instead, I reached out and touched the new lock. It was cold. Unfamiliar. Like the family I had somehow ended up with. A voice inside whispered that something was wrong, wrong beyond the arrogance, wrong beyond the disrespect. But I swallowed that thought, the way I had swallowed so many things. I knocked once more, softer this time. The music stopped. Footsteps approached. Then a woman's voice, sharp, dismissive. You really don't get it, do you? And that was when I realized the door wasn't the only thing they intended to keep me out of. What happened next would shift everything. The door swung open just far enough for my cousin Melissa to appear, her hand still on the knob as if she needed to make sure I didn't slip past her. She had that look on her face, the one she used to give me at family gatherings when she thought I was being too quiet, as if silence itself were an offense. She crossed her arms. Why are you making this difficult? We're all trying to grieve, and you show up demanding keys. Grieve. The word hit harder than the lock had. I'm not demanding anything, I said, keeping my voice level. I came here to spend a few days. Aunt Alma wanted. She cut me off with a scoff. Don't. Just, don't. We all know she spoiled you. It doesn't give you the right to take everything now that she's gone. Take everything. That was their angle. Behind Melissa, I saw flickers of movement, people I didn't recognize, red Solo cups in hand, drifting casually through my aunt's living room as if it had always belonged to them. The old quilt my aunt kept folded by the fireplace was on the floor. Mud tracked across the wood she polished every spring. The lamp she loved, one of the only things she splurged on, was being used as a drink stand. My stomach tightened, but I said nothing. Not yet. Melissa, I murmured, the cabin is legally mine. You know that. Her eyes flashed with a kind of triumph that didn't match the conversation, too sharp, too ready. So you are here for money. It was almost impressive, the way she twisted it. Almost. I took a slow breath. I'm here because this place mattered to her. And it matters to me. She laughed, quiet, bitter. Sure. And I'm the Queen of Norway. The door began to close again, but this time I placed my hand gently against it, not pushing, just stopping the motion. Melissa, I said softly, what's really going on? For the first time, her expression faltered. Not much. Just enough. And in that tiny hesitation, I knew something was hiding behind their anger. Something they weren't ready for me to see. Melissa didn't answer. She just glanced over her shoulder, as if someone inside might step forward with instructions. But no one came. The laughter had thinned, replaced by the uneasy hush of people pretending not to listen while listening to everything. That silence was louder than any argument. She shifted her stance, arms tightening across her chest. There's nothing going on. We're just using the place for a bit. You haven't been around. We didn't think you'd care. A familiar ache stirred in me, the quiet one you get when people tell you who they think you are, and you realize they've never looked closely enough to know the truth. I do care, I said. More than you understand. Her jaw tensed at that, as if the idea offended her. Eric appeared behind her, stepping into view with a beer in hand, sweat beading at his temple from whatever chaos he'd been orchestrating inside. Is she still here? He muttered, as if I were an inconvenience rather than a person. Melissa exhaled sharply. She thinks we're hiding something. Eric's expression didn't shift, not outrage, not disbelief, not even discomfort. Just a small, calculated shrug. If she wants to think that, let her, he said. Nothing we can do about her paranoia. Paranoia. A neat little word. The kind meant to put me back in place. I studied them carefully, the stiffness in Melissa's posture, the casualness in Eric's. One was too defensive, the other was too relaxed. A combination I'd learned, over time, to pay attention to. Can I at least get some of my aunt's things? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Her journals, her letters. They should have been in her dresser. Melissa blinked, once, too slowly. Oh, she said. Those. We haven't seen them. A lie. A clumsy one. She knew I knew it, and for a brief second, her confidence faltered again. Eric shot her a warning glance she didn't quite catch in time. Something tightened in my chest, not anger, but clarity. A slow, cold understanding beginning to take shape. I'll be back tomorrow, I said quietly. We can talk then. Eric smirked. Do what you want. It won't change anything. He had no idea how wrong he was. Because by the next day, the truth would start cracking through their silence, and they wouldn't be able to stop it. I drove back to town that evening, the lake fading in my rearview like a memory trying not to disappear. The sky was turning bruised purple, the kind of color my aunt used to call storm thinking, the moment right before the weather decided what it wanted to be. I understood that feeling too well. I stopped at a small diner, the only place open at that hour. The waitress gave me a tired smile and a cup of coffee so warm it felt like an apology. I wrapped my hands around it, letting the heat settle the shake I'd kept hidden all afternoon. I replayed their faces, Melissa's too sharp defensiveness, Eric's unsettling calm, and I realized none of it matched grief. Not the real kind. Grief doesn't smirk. Grief doesn't lie about journals. Grief doesn't change locks before the funeral flowers have even wilted. Something else was living in that cabin. I pulled out the envelope the lawyer had given me the week before, the one with my aunt's handwriting on the front. She'd left it for me in case she didn't get the chance to explain everything. I'd only skimmed it before. The words felt too heavy at the time. Now they felt necessary. I slid the letter out, her familiar script curling across the page like the gentle way she used to speak. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hate that I couldn't say this in person. I know what the others think of the cabin. They've always wanted something from it. Be careful. I stopped there, not because the words frightened me, but because they didn't. They confirmed what I had already begun to feel. The waitress refilled my cup. Long day? She asked. I nodded. Long week. I folded the letter back into the envelope and tucked it carefully into my bag. Not everything needed to be read at once. Some truths have to be swallowed slowly. Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and lake water all the way from the cabin, as if reminding me it was still there, waiting, watching, enduring. Just like I was. I stepped into the cool night, feeling something steadying inside me. Not anger. Not fear. Resolve. Because tomorrow, I wouldn't be arriving empty-handed, and they still had no idea who they were really dealing with. The next morning, the lake was still. Too still. The kind of stillness that presses against your ribs and waits for you to breathe first. I arrived at the cabin just after sunrise, when the air was cool enough to bite but bright enough to reveal everything people try to hide in the dark. The gravel crunched under my shoes, louder than I remembered, but maybe that was because the cabin wasn't welcoming me the way it once had. Or maybe it was. Just in a different way. The porch was littered with half-empty bottles and soggy paper plates, the aftermath of a party that had gone on too long, long enough for whoever stayed the night to forget that the owner might show up again. A sweatshirt I didn't recognize was draped over my aunt's old rocking chair. That bothered me more than anything else. The door opened before I could knock. It was Eric, hair damp, shirt wrinkled, eyes tired but alert. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked prepared. "So you came back," he said, leaning against the doorframe like it belonged to him. I said I would. He exhaled, a sound halfway between annoyance and calculation. "Look, we talked last night. Me, Melissa, some of the others. And we think it's best if you take some time before trying to make any decisions about the place." "Decisions?" I asked quietly. "About something that's already mine?" He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You don't need to get technical." Technical. Legal. Factual. All the things they wanted to avoid. I stepped past him onto the porch, my shoes brushing against the dried leaves scattered across the boards. The air inside the cabin smelled like stale beer and cheap cologne. "I want my aunt's things," I said. "Today." Eric didn't move. "There's nothing here for you." Before I could respond, the screen door creaked again. Melissa appeared behind him, arms wrapped around her chest as if she were cold, even though the morning sun was already warming the porch. "You need to stop," she said. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "Harder for who, though?" I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were ringed with fatigue, her voice thinner than yesterday's, and her fingers trembled when she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Fear. Not of me. Of something else. Something bigger. And in that moment, I understood one thing with unsettling clarity. They weren't trying to keep me out because they wanted the cabin. They were trying to keep me out because they needed it. And whatever they needed it for, they were running out of time to hide it. "You said." I didn't push past them. Not yet. Sometimes the quietest step is the one that hits hardest, and I wanted them to feel every inch of my presence on that porch. "I'd like to see her room," I said softly. "You don't have a reason to refuse that." Eric opened his mouth, probably to invent one, but something behind me caught his attention. His eyes flicked past my shoulder, and for the briefest moment, panic flashed across his face. Real panic. Not irritation, not bravado, fear. I turned. A gust of wind had blown something across the porch floor, a folded piece of paper, torn from a notebook, sliding to a stop against my shoe. I bent down before either of them could react. Eric stepped forward. "Don't." But I was already holding it. The handwriting wasn't my aunt's. The strokes were messy, hurried, uneven. 4 words. That was all. The sheriff asked again. My pulse didn't quicken, but the air around me did. It stiffened, thickened, as though even the lake itself had leaned in. Melissa lunged for it, not aggressively, just desperately. "That's nothing. It's not for you." "Who's it for?" I asked quietly. Her mouth opened, closed. She looked at Eric, searching for the answer he always seemed to have ready. But he didn't speak this time. He was watching me too closely. I folded the paper, slow enough that they saw the deliberateness of it, and slid it into my pocket. "Like I said," I murmured, "I want her things." Eric stepped in front of the doorway, blocking it entirely now. "This is getting out of hand. You need to go. We'll sort everything out and call you." I looked at him, calm and steady. "You changed the locks. You threw a party. You hid her journals. Now you're intercepting messages about the sheriff." Melissa blanched. Eric didn't. He just let out a long, quiet breath. "You're reading into things you don't understand. Then help me understand." Silence. dense, charged, trembling at the edges. For the first time since I arrived, Eric stepped back, not in surrender, but in calculation. He closed the door, slowly, between us. "Come back tonight," he said. "We'll talk then." It wasn't an invitation. It was a slip. A mistake. Because desperation always reveals itself when the clock starts running out. And by tonight, they would realize they'd left me with far more than a note, they'd left me with a thread I now intended to pull. I didn't drive far. Just down the road, to the old public dock my aunt used to take me to when the cabin felt too full of other people's noise. The boards creaked the same way they always had, soft, familiar, like a greeting from someone who still knew how to be gentle. I sat at the edge, letting the lake breeze cool the last traces of tension from my skin. Nights at the cabin were supposed to feel like this. Quiet. Honest. Not whatever was breathing through those locked doors now. "Back already?" The voice came from behind me, Officer Hale. The sheriff's deputy who'd been part of this town for as long as I could remember. He stood with his hands in his pockets, face weathered by sun and patience. "I heard you were in town," he said. "Figured you'd stop by the cabin." I gave him a small, tired smile. "I did." "And?" He asked it gently, but there was weight beneath the word. I pulled out the folded note, smoothing its bent edges. "Looks like someone thinks the sheriff is asking questions." Hale raised an eyebrow, the kind of expression people only make when they've been caught halfway between truth and duty. "We've been checking on a few things," he said finally. "Routine probate follow-ups." Probate. The word sat strangely beside the panic I'd seen in Eric's face. "Did you talk to my cousins?" I asked. "Talked," he said. "Asked for documents. They weren't exactly cooperative." I let out a slow breath. That much I could have predicted. "What were you looking for?" His gaze drifted toward the lake, as though the answer were somewhere in the reflection of the trees. "Your aunt had 2 boxes she kept by her bed," he said. "Important papers. Some personal notes. Legal stuff. We never received any of it." My chest went still. I remembered those boxes. My aunt's careful hands. Her voice saying, "If anything ever happens to me, you'll know what to do." Hale continued, "Your cousins claimed they didn't find them after she passed." A lie. I heard it for exactly what it was. "If you come across anything," Hale said quietly, "bring it straight to me. Don't confront them alone." I nodded, because it was polite, because it was expected. But inside, something had shifted. Not anger. Not fear. Alignment. A line had connected, the missing journals, the changed locks, the sudden party, the note, the sheriff's questions. They weren't having fun in that cabin. They were hiding in it. And tonight, when I went back, I would finally start pulling the truth into the light they'd been trying so hard to avoid. I returned to the cabin just after dusk, when the sky turned the color of coal ash and the lake mirrored it perfectly. From the road, the house looked calm, too calm. Like a stage set after the actors have stepped off, leaving the props behind to pretend everything is normal. But I could feel the tension from the driveway. Lights were on. Voices murmured. Shadows passed behind the curtains, moving with the kind of restless purpose people have when they're scrambling to look composed. I approached the door with an ease I didn't entirely feel. Eric opened it before I knocked, again, only this time he wasn't smirking. He wasn't posturing. He was pacing. Finally, he muttered, stepping aside. "Get in." Melissa was inside, arms wrapped around herself, pacing in small circles like she was trying to stay warm in a room that wasn't cold. Her eyes darted toward me and then away, as if she expected me to judge her and couldn't bear it. "What's going on?" I asked. She pointed toward the dining table. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The table was scattered with open drawers, envelopes torn at the seams, boxes emptied into piles. And at the center, sitting quietly, painfully familiar, were the 2 wooden boxes my aunt had kept by her bed. They'd pried them open. The lock on the smaller one had been forced, splintered at the hinge. The larger box lay half open, papers spilling out like secrets gasping for air. My throat tightened, not with anger, for me, anger was too loud, but with something deeper. A low, steady ache of violation. Eric rubbed the back of his neck. We didn't take anything. We were just looking. For what? I asked, my voice calm enough to unsettle both of them. They exchanged a glance, the kind that carried years of shared guilt in a single flicker. Melissa swallowed. There were documents. Ones we thought your aunt might have hidden. Something about the mortgage, or maybe a clause in the will. We were trying to figure things out before you made things official. Official. A careful word. A rehearsed one. I stepped closer, picking up a piece of paper from the pile. It wasn't about a mortgage. Or a clause. Or anything as simple as they wanted me to believe. It was an overdue notice. One of dozens. All addressed to Eric and Melissa. None addressed to my aunt. I looked at them, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. Their debt. Their desperation. Their intrusion into the last safe place I had. My voice stayed soft, but the room felt colder as I spoke. How long have you been planning to sell the cabin? Melissa's breath hitched. Eric's jaw tightened. And the truth finally broke the surface. But the next paper I picked up would reveal something even they didn't expect, and that was when control shifted for good. I didn't wait for them to answer my question about selling the cabin. Their silence had already confirmed it. Instead, I reached for the second page in the stack, one that looked older, the paper yellowing slightly around the edges. It wasn't an overdue notice. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't addressed to them. It was addressed to me. A letter. From my aunt. Eric stiffened when he recognized the handwriting. Melissa took a half step forward, then froze, as if her own guilt had turned her to stone. I unfolded it slowly, carefully. My aunt's script curved across the page in her familiar, steady lines. If they pressure you, don't agree to anything. The cabin is safe from their debts. I made sure of that. You are the sole owner. No one can take it from you but you. My breath left me in a long, quiet exhale. Not in shock, but in confirmation. In understanding. She had known. I kept reading. If they come to you crying, begging, accusing, they are trying to survive mistakes that were never yours to carry. Protect the cabin. Protect yourself. A warmth spread through my chest, not comfort, but clarity. My aunt hadn't just left me a place. She'd left me instructions. Protection. Strategy. And a warning. I lowered the letter. Eric's face was unreadable, a mask held together by threads that were starting to fray. Melissa's eyes filled, not with sorrow, but with the dawning realization of what they had just lost. You weren't supposed to see that, she whispered. I looked at her gently. Then you shouldn't have opened it. Eric stepped forward, frustration cracking through his carefully maintained calm. You don't understand. We're drowning. The creditors. This cabin, I said, cutting him off softly, won't save you. He pressed his hands against the table, leaning his weight into shaking arms. We need it. Just a sale, one sale, and we could fix everything. Melissa nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. We thought she'd leave it to all of us. We thought it was the only chance we had. I let the silence settle, thick, honest, impossible to escape. You tried to take the only place I had left, I said quietly. The only part of her I still felt close to. Neither of them spoke. And then, as I sifted deeper into the box, my fingers brushed a sealed envelope, heavy, official, marked with a legal crest. My cousins didn't recognize it. But I did. Because inside that envelope was the leverage my aunt had prepared for this exact moment, and opening it would change the balance entirely. The sealed envelope felt heavier than its size allowed, densely weighted, like a stone wrapped in paper. I turned it over in my hand, recognizing the embossed crest on the front, my aunt's attorney. The same attorney who had spoken so gently at the reading of the will, as if he knew there were things he wasn't allowed to say yet. Eric noticed the crest a second too late. His posture changed. His breath hitched. His confidence curdled into something thin and trembling. "Where did you get that?" he asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I broke the seal. Inside was a single document, neatly folded, pristine, and devastating in its simplicity. A transfer of ownership protection clause. One my aunt had added 6 months before she died. It stated, in clear, unambiguous lines, that the cabin could not be sold without my direct, signed consent. No co-owner existed. No claim from relatives or interested parties would be recognized in probate. Any attempt to interfere with the property would be considered an act of bad faith and legally challengeable. Melissa sank into a chair as if the air had been ripped out from under her. "This can't be real," she whispered. I placed the document gently on the table, letting them see every word for themselves. "It's notarized. Filed. Witnessed. Binding." Eric ran a hand through his hair, pacing in a tight circle, muttering curses under his breath, desperation finally stripping away the arrogance he had worn like armor. "You don't understand," he said, voice cracking. "We didn't have another option. They're calling every day. The debts." "You should have asked me," I said quietly. He laughed, bitter and broken. "Asked you? For help? You would have said no. You never gave me the chance." The room fell into a thick, trembling silence. Melissa looked at me, not with anger now, not even with envy, but with something far more fragile. "Please," she whispered. "We're not bad people. We just made mistakes." I believed that. Or at least, I believed they believed it. But belief doesn't repair violation. I folded the document again, slipping it into my bag. Its weight didn't feel heavy now, it felt like balance. "Eric," I said softly, "you need to tell me everything. Tonight. No more lies." He hesitated. The kind of hesitation that comes when someone realizes they've run out of places to hide. And then he nodded. But what he confessed next would reveal the real danger, and it wasn't the debt at all. Eric sat down slowly, like someone lowering himself into cold water. Melissa pressed her hands together, knuckles white, bracing for a truth she had been avoiding as much as hiding. I didn't speak. I didn't rush them. Silence has a way of uncovering what words try to bury. Eric finally looked up. "It's not just debt collectors," he said. "It's someone specific." I kept my voice soft. "Who?" He swallowed hard. "A man named Weller." The name meant nothing to me, but the fear behind it did. Eric's shoulders tightened at the mere act of saying it aloud. "He's not a bank," Eric continued. "He's not even a company. He's—" Melissa cut in, voice trembling. "He's someone who gives money fast and takes everything twice as fast when you fall behind." My stomach went still. Loan sharks don't scare easily. But people indebted to them always carry the same look, hollow at the edges, jittery around the truth, always glancing at the door as if expecting footsteps. "How much do you owe him?" I asked. Eric exhaled shakily. 57,000. It wasn't the number that chilled me. It was the way he said it, quiet, drained, like someone confessing to a crime they didn't know they'd committed until it was too late. He said, Melissa whispered, that if we didn't pay by the end of the month, he'd take collateral. I felt the pieces click into place with terrible precision. "And you told him about the cabin," I said. Melissa nodded, eyes glistening. We thought once you saw how much we needed it, you'd agree to sell. Or at least let us borrow against it." A soft, steady ache slid through my chest. "You thought I'd give up the only home she left me," I said. The only place she protected. We were desperate, Eric said. And stupid. We told him too much. Melissa buried her face in her hands. He's coming tomorrow. The room went silent. Not the tense, nervous silence from before. This one felt deeper, colder, like the moment when the lake freezes solid and everything beneath goes still. I stood, my voice calm and unwavering. If he's coming here, then I need to be here too. Eric shook his head quickly. No, you don't understand who he is. I understand exactly who he is, I said. And what he thinks he's entitled to. Neither of them spoke. A storm was coming, yes. But it wasn't the kind they feared. Because Weller hadn't met me yet, and tomorrow, he would learn the cabin wasn't collateral. It was a line he should never have crossed. You said. Weller arrived just after noon. No roaring engine. No theatrics. Just a dark sedan rolling up the gravel drive with the slow confidence of someone who'd taken things from people before and expected today to be no different. Eric and Melissa stood behind me on the porch, both of them shaking in small, uneven ways, Melissa twisting the sleeve of her sweater, Eric shifting his weight as if ready to run but too ashamed to take the first step. Weller stepped out. Mid-40s. Crisp shirt. Clean boots. A face that had learned how to stay pleasant while dealing in violence. He looked at me first, not at the cabin. You must be the niece, he said, smiling like he already owned the ground beneath my feet. Your cousins told me you'd be reasonable. I nodded once. Calm. They shouldn't have. His smile thinned. I'm here for what I'm owed. You're not owed this cabin, I said quietly. He stepped closer, slow and measured. They put it up as collateral. They signed papers. Papers for something that wasn't theirs to promise. He raised an eyebrow as if amused. How is that my problem? I reached into my bag and pulled out the document my aunt had left, the one with the crest, the signatures, the protection she'd set in place like a shield she knew I would one day need. I handed it to him. He scanned it. The amusement drained from his face like water slipping through fingers. This is binding, he muttered. Yes, I said. It is. He looked at Eric and Melissa with disdain, cold, sharp, humiliating. You didn't mention this. They didn't know, I said before either could speak. And even if they had, it wouldn't have changed what's written. The wind shifted. The lake breathed. The cabin stood behind me, unchanged, unshakable. Weller exhaled once, long and irritated, then folded the document sharply. Your family owes me money. I'll find another way to collect. You will, I said softly. But not from here. He studied me for a moment, something calculating flickering behind his eyes, then he nodded, turned, and walked back to his car. No threats. No promises. Just quiet defeat. When his car disappeared down the road, Eric sank onto the porch steps. Melissa wiped her eyes with shaking hands. We're sorry, she whispered. For everything. I believed her. I didn't excuse her. I hope you learn from this, I said gently. But the cabin stays with me. They both nodded. Later, as the sun dipped low and the lake turned gold, I stood alone on the porch, my aunt's porch, feeling the weight that had held my chest for days finally ease. Not because I had won. But because I had protected what mattered. Revenge hadn't been loud. It hadn't been cruel. It had been simply truth. And truth, delivered calmly, is its own kind of justice. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.